Hey, Carlo. Yeah, I turned it on to see if you could hear me. Okay. Okay, thank you. Uh, Can you hear me, Carlo?
Yes, Stacy, I can hear you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Susan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Carlo?
I'm doing well. So we're going to be joined by our Deputy City Clerk, Stacy Reddy. So she's
Okay.
going to be helping us with the meeting. And she's got your presentation as well.
Good.
Well, you look like you're in a cozy, like, lodge somewhere.
It's my family room.
Very nice.
It's very cozy.
Oh, that is cozy looking.
I'm hoping the dogs are going to cooperate. Last time they barked the whole time during the meeting. So
Well, you know, animals always cooperate during Zoom meetings.
same with children. I moved back here, which is where they are, hoping that maybe they'll be fine because I'm in the same room.
I have a cat. I have two of them, and one of them he generally ignores any work things that are going on during the day, except when there's a Zoom meeting. Then she shows up, and then she doesn't want to show her face, so she turns herself completely around, and that's just, she likes to face the camera.
I love it.
Hey, good afternoon. Oh, your mic is muted. You're muted right now.
Okay, am I heard?
I can hear you.
It helps to be unmuted.
It does, very much so. How are you doing?
Well, we're doing good. I'm enjoying the rain. I tell you, it's been beautiful.
I do too. I mean, it may not be a popular opinion, but I love the rain.
Well, I love it when we need it. If we don't need it, I like the sun, but I recognize that we gotta have this water, especially up in the mountains.
Yeah.
We're hoping that we get a good storm and it brings a lot of snow to the Sierra Nevada. So our
Absolutely.
lakes can fill again.
Hello, all.
Hello, John, how are you?
Good. Now, are we able to tell how many people are watching, looking in with us, non-members?
I'm not sure that you can see it on your screen, but I believe that Stacy and I can see and we can let you know.
Okay.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how many people are interested in the library and
Absolutely.
what's happened to it.
We did put out a social media post a day or two ago, just announcing
Okay.
the meeting for folks to let them know. Hey, John, if you're speaking to us, you're muted.
Hit the wrong button. Yes, and I believe Bonnie Baranoff, our publicity chair, put something out on Facebook as well.
Very good.
I saw it on Facebook. I saw the Friends of the Library one.
Okay. Facebook. Facebook plays a role.
All right, looks like Task Force Member Harris is logging in, and we have Lynn, our Senior Management Analyst. So I believe we're all here, Stacy, and if you could help get us started with the meeting, we'll need to do roll and a few items before we get to the agenda. Oh, Stacy, I believe you're currently muted.
Can you hear me now? Okay. All right, well, let's get this meeting rolling. Starting with the roll call. Task Force Member Moyer,
I think that's me here.
okay. Task Force Member Dugan, here. I believe I've seen them online. Task Force Member Harris,
Here.
Task Force Member Moore,
Here.
Task Force Member Navarro,
Here,
Task Force Member Smith,
Here?
Task Force Member Wilcox.
Present.
Okay, and Assistant City Manager Carlo Tomeno is here, and Lynn Dedman, correct? Yes. Okay, it's over to you, Carlo.
Very good. All right, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. So we have 4 items under current business on our agenda. The first is the approval of the minutes for our first meeting on November 18th. And so I'm not sure if you've all had an opportunity to review those minutes. Hopefully you have. We're going to need a motion and a second to approve the minutes from
Move
one of the task
approval.
force members.
Move approval?
I'll second that.
Very good. Do we have a vote?
I,
All right.
Okay, am I supposed to call out each vote?
Yes.
Okay. Task Force Member Moyer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Task Force Member Dugan, how do you vote? They may not be online. Task Force Member Harris, how do you vote?
Yes.
Task Force Member Moore, how do you vote?
Yes.
Task Force Member Navarro, how do you vote?
Yes,
Task Force Member Schmitz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Task Force Member Wilcox, how do you vote?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously.
All right, very good. The next item on our agenda is a presentation from our Deputy City Clerk. This is a presentation regarding the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order. So Deputy City Clerk, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Tomeno, first we have public comment to read.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Let's go to public comment first.
Real
Okay.
quick, folks, could I just stop for a sec? Do we have any members of the public present for purposes of the next minutes? And are there any absences? Because we'll need that to make the next minutes. And when we watch the recording, sometimes we don't get to see all that. So do we know if we have any members of the public present and any absences?
Let's see. I see 3 members of the public in attendance, I believe, and we still haven't heard from Task Force Member Dugan. Oh, I see him online, but I haven't heard him as far as him speaking.
All right, we'll call him present. So there
Okay.
are no absences on the task force, but we do have 3 members of the public present. Thank you for reviewing that for me.
Okay. Oh, yes.
All right, so next we'll go to public comment, Deputy City Clerk.
Yes. I have a public comment from Joe Glidden, and he says, at the first meeting of the Mesa Library Task Force, little attention was given to the original Plan A, the funding and construction of a new permanent library. Instead, the task force quickly pivoted to Plan B, the remodeling, retrofitting, and renovation of the existing interim, temporary, and make-do library, as if it were a foregone conclusion that the people of La Mesa don't deserve a new, modern, and full-size library that even the most humble communities in our county now have. I formally request that the task force make a good faith effort to pursue funding for a permanent library, as promised in a past memorandum of understanding between the city and county as part of its mission. I also just suggest that the city and the individual task force members make a concerted effort to enlist the help and cooperation of the public at large by actively encouraging civic engagement at each meeting. Every day, hundreds of La Mesans visit our library, and yet none of them showed up for your first meeting. Is this an example of public apathy, task force naive, or bureaucratic indifference? You can do better than this. Thank you for listening to my concerns and suggestions. And that concludes the public comment, and there are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy City Clerk. So next, we're going to move to item 4.2, which is a presentation from our Deputy City Clerk regarding the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay. Okay, so I will be presenting the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order. Again, my name is Stacy Reddy, Deputy City Clerk, and I'm giving this presentation for our City Clerk, Megan Wiegelman. Please bear with me. This is my first presentation, my first formal presentation, and so you all are my victims per se. So let's begin. I'm going to screen share. Are you all able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. All right, so the basics of California's open and public meeting law of the Ralph M. Brown Act. The heart of the Brown Act is all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency. So beginning with the background of this legislation, the Brown Act was enacted in 1953. The purpose and intent of the Brown Act is for public agencies to serve the public with transparency. The Brown Act is often referred to as California's open meeting law. Public meetings are open to the public for two reasons. First, so that the public can attend meetings at the same time in the same place to see how decisions are being made. And second, so that the public can participate in all phases of government decision making. The Brown Act applies to all legislative bodies of local agencies in California, such as councils, boards, commissions, committees, and the meetings of these bodies must comply with the open meeting requirements of the Brown Act. So the essentials for an open and public meeting. The meeting must be publicly noticed. The agenda must adequately describe the items to be considered. No action may be taken on items not appearing on the agenda. Members of the public must be given the opportunity to address the legislative body before or during consideration of the item. And items may be heard in closed session in only 13 specific cases. I'm not sure if that one applies to this task force at this moment. An agenda for a regular meeting should be publicly noticed and posted 72 hours before the meeting occurs. For a special meeting, the notice should be posted 24 hours in advance and be freely accessible to the members of the public. So the notice should state the time and place and give a brief general description of each item of business discussed at the meeting. For the no action may be taken on items not appearing on the agenda. There can be a time allotted for speakers to comment on non-agenda items, but this has to be publicly noticed on the agenda as well for members of the public to prepare and share their comments. Members of the public must be given the opportunity to address the legislative body. So members can submit their comments electronically, teleconference, or speak in person before COVID, you were able to speak in person. And then when we have open session, we'll be able to speak in person at that time. Currently, Currently, the websites for the public meetings have a link created to submit public comment, and the comment will be read aloud during the meeting. Members are not required to register or state their names to provide any information for their meeting in attendance or to participate. Next slide. So a meeting is defined as a meeting to include any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate upon any item that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. A meeting cannot be held if there is no majority or quorum, meaning there are 7 board members for the library task force. To hold a meeting, 4 members need to be present for a quorum. If there are 3 members or under, no meeting should take place. So without a quorum, you may not go through the agenda, you may not hear presentations by staff or consultants, and you may not take any public comment. The exceptions for meetings that are not meetings are the individual contacts, conferences, community meetings, another body of the local agency, and social or ceremonial events. Individual contacts, that's just the meaning of individual contact between a member and any other persons, constituents, advocates, consultants, news reporters, agency staff, or colleagues. A discussion is permissible only between a member of the legislative body and a member of the public. You can attend outside meetings such as conferences and community meetings and etc., but you cannot speak or discuss on a agendized item if the majority of the legislative body are gathered. Other exceptions. Board members may attend meetings, events covered in the exceptions, provided that a majority of members do not discuss among themselves other than as part of the scheduled program, business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency. So remember, the intent of the Brown Act is that actions of the legislative body be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. Next, we have our slide to avoid serial meetings. So serial meetings deprive the public of participation in the decision-making process. We have an option of where the serial meeting is a daisy chain where member A talks to member B talks to member C talks to member D, and so forth. Serial meetings are specifically prohibited. So if member A talks to member B, then member B talks to member C, regardless of the days and the times that varies, members of the legislative body are in violation of the Brown Act because the item of discussion or subject matter pertaining to an agendized item was not properly noted. Oh, I hear a echo. Sorry, hold on. Okay, can you hear me okay? All right,
Yeah.
thank you. So again, you'll be in violation of the Brown Act if you have discussion on the subject matter pertaining to an agendized item that was not properly noticed or shared with the public in an open meeting. A discussion directly or indirectly is strongly discouraged. Then we have the other type of serial meetings, which is called a hub and a spoke, where member A speaks to other members in separate discussions, but a discussion is still taking place among the majority of the members of the legislative body. So it seems to me member A is a little troublemaker. Also with emails and social media, those type of communications are very sensitive and it's an area of concern. So it's best to refrain from using those methods as well.
Can we ask
Nope.
questions?
Yes, but I would prefer that you ask them at the end of the PowerPoint, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Notice requirements. So every agenda or public notice must be posted in a place freely accessible to the public, must be publicly posted in advance of the meeting, must specify time, date, and location, and must be provided to each member and to any person making a written request to receive. The Brown Act has specific rules for noticing meetings. In order to ensure that the public has sufficient information in order for attendance, there must be effective notice in the agenda that adequately describes the matters of consideration and discussion. Posting times for the meeting. So I've already went over this previously, but again, regular meetings are 72 hours prior to the meeting. Special meetings are 24 hours prior to the meeting. Adjourned meetings are within the 24 hours after the time of adjournment. Continued hearings, same as for adjourned, except when continued to a time less than 24 hours. And closed session and emergency sessions don't require prior notice, I believe. Okay. I just wanted to speak more on the continued hearings, even though it may not apply to this task force. On occasion, the motioner or the member that seconds can decide to continue a matter of discussion to another meeting date. So that's additional information for you. Action on items not published on the agenda. So the legislative body may take action on items not appearing on the posted agenda if any of the following conditions exist: by a majority vote that an emergency exists, by a 2/3 vote that the need to take immediate action exists, and that need for action came to attention of agency after the agenda was posted, and when an item appeared on an agenda and was continued from a meeting not more than 5 days earlier. 2/3 vote would be 8 members voting yes out of a commission of 11. Other exceptions in which action or direction may occur when not agendized is when members of the board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions, ask a question for clarification, make a brief announcement, or make a brief report on his or her own activities. And other exceptions, a member of the board or the board itself may provide a reference to staff or other resources for factual information, request staff to report back to the body at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, and take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. So rights of the public, we're going into things that we just previously discussed, but just to reiterate, rights of the public, all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency. Members of the public cannot be required to provide their names or any other information to attend a meeting. Meetings cannot be held in a facility that prohibits attendance based on race, religious creed, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, or inaccessible to the disabled. Let's see. So members of the public, they're not required to register or state their names. They're not required to provide other information or complete a questionnaire or fulfill any other conditions to attend and participate in the meeting. So this story comes to mind when I was a legislative recorder at the city of San Diego, and during the meetings we always had an individual that came in and he named himself Nacho Libre. I don't know if you guys remember the movie of Nacho Libre, but it was about this wrestler, Jack Black, the actor played the wrestler, and so this guy would come in to the council meeting and he was dressed as the wrestler, and he would put his name as Nacho Libre, even though we knew his name wasn't Nacho Libre. So, but under those circumstances, he does not have to provide his real name, and he can have the opportunity to be able to give his public comment. So, rights of the public. Agendas and other writings distributed to a majority of the body must be made available to the public at the meeting if prepared by the local agency or member of the body, or after the meeting if prepared by some other person. Every agenda for a regular meeting must allow members of the public to speak on any item of the interest, so long as the item is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. The public must be allowed to speak on a specific item of business before or during the body's consideration of it. Let's see. And so Responding to public questions. The commissioners may respond during the meeting to public questions regarding items on the agenda. Public may also ask about items not on the agenda. Commissioners may not discuss or take action, but may briefly respond. And it's optional to ask the staff to place the matter on a future agenda. So usually that can consist of a time, or the agenda can consist of a time on putting the matters of non-agenda matters where the public can discuss their issue or state their concern or issue to a matter in the city, and they be a time allotted maybe like 2 minutes to 1 minute for their concern, and the members of the board or the task force can be able to refer to them or give them the resources that they need in regards to their concern. All right, subcommittees. So we have subcommittees. We have two types, which are the ad hoc committees and the standing committees. Beginning with the ad hoc, they contain less than a quorum of the voting commission members, no more than 4 members, more temporary in nature. They focus on a specific topic, last less than a year in nature, and are disbanded upon completion of the subcommittee's work. The ad hoc committees are not subject to the Brown Act and are not open to the public. And then we have the standing committees, which contains less than a quorum of the voting commission members, no more than 4 members, more permanent in nature, address ongoing areas of interest, broad topics, often last a year or longer, and meet on a regular basis. They are subject to the Brown Act with the agenda posting, the requirements, and the minutes, and they must be open to the public. The City Council creates subcommittees as needed to accomplish the work of the council and to assist meeting the goals and objectives of the council. Subcommittees are categorized, which I just explained, the 2 types of the ad hoc and the standing committees. We have the ad hoc committees such as the Business Rebound Subcommittee, Citizen Emergency Preparedness Subcommittee, and the Housing Affordability Subcommittees. And then we have the standing committees such as the Audit Subcommittees, Downtown Village Promotion and Events Subcommittee, and MacArthur Park Community Center Subcommittee. Subcommittee should not be created to do something that is within the designated function of the task force. So the task force will still carry out their mission and objective to advise the City Council on subject matters pertaining to the La Mesa Library, and a subcommittee cannot be formed to carry out the same function. So we're going to move on to Robert's Rules of Order, the basics of parliamentary procedure. So they're starting off with explaining the role of the chair. The chair of the library task force is charged with running the meeting. As a member of the task force, the chair has the full right to participate in the debate, discussion, and decision making. All participants should be recognized by the chair prior to speaking. This is a key point for running orderly meetings. It's customary for the chair to speak at the end of the discussion and debate stage and allow the other members to speak first. So each member of the task force will be given the opportunity to address or comment on their concern for the discussion at hand. The chair will finish out the discussion with their comments, and then votes will be taken thereafter. There's the discussion of an agenda item. The chair should announce the agenda item and invite the appropriate person or persons to report on the item, including any recommendation that he or she might have. The chair should ask members of the group if they have any questions of clarification after the presentation. At this point, members of the group may ask clarifying questions to the person or persons who reported on the item, and that person or persons should be given the time to respond. The agenda, which is the order of business, should include the call to order, the roll call, minutes, staff and committee reports, non-agenda business, public comments, and adjournments. At the time of an item of discussion, the staff report is given. Thereafter, public comments should be taken. Then the board members or task force members will be given the opportunity to discuss their area of concern or ask the questions at hand. The chair should invite public comments. Under the Brown Act, the public must be given a right to speak on an item before or during its consideration. If numerous members of the public indicate a desire to speak on the agenda item, the chair may reasonably limit the time of speakers. At the conclusion of the public comments, the chair should announce the public input has concluded. So as previously stated, the public will be given an opportunity to comment on the matter of discussion, usually after the staff report is given. Given the number of members of the public comment, the chair can limit the time that is given to speak. If the public comment is usually 2 minutes per person, if there's a large number of speakers, the chair can decide to limit the public comment to 1 minute to control the order of the meeting and the time frame of the meeting. After closing public comments, the group should have any necessary additional discussion, and the chair should invite a motion if the agenda item requires an official action of the task force. After being recognized by the chair, any member can introduce a motion when no other motion is being considered. A motion requires a second to be considered. Each motion must be decided if it's passed, defeated, or tabled. Any motion must be consistent with the posted agenda. So if the motion is made and seconded, the chair should make sure everyone understands the motion. This is done in one of 3 ways. The chair can ask the maker of the motion to repeat it. The chair can repeat the motion, and the chair can ask the secretary or the clerk of the task force to repeat it. Usually before making the votes, the chair will reiterate the motion and who seconded, and then they will state what the motion was before voting on that agenda item. Depending on the procedures of the task force, the chair or staff member takes the vote. This is normally accomplished by asking for ayes and nays. If members of the task force do not vote, then they abstain. Unless the rules of the task force provide otherwise, or unless a super majority is required, a simple majority determines whether the motion passes or is defeated. A motion to limit debate, it can be shortened or lengthened to the maximum amount of time members of the task force may speak. It can be set at a maximum number of times a member may speak, or set the total time allotted for discussion. It says call the previous question or calling the question, and you can also end the debate on the current agenda item and immediately vote. So are there any questions? That's the end of the presentation.
I've got a few.
Of course, okay. I'll try to answer them as best as I can, but I may have to refer you to our city clerk, and we'll make sure to answer them.
Backing up to the Brown Act provisions. So I'm pretty sure the answer to this is no, that we should not call each other or email each other about items related to this task force.
Yes, it's strongly discouraged that you do not do that, but it's only discouraged if you have a majority of the legislative body. So if you have like a one-on-one conversation with you and another person, you can speak on that matter. But if you are having a conversation with 4 or 5 people of the legislative body, then that violates the Brown Act.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is Member Moore and I, prior to the formation of this committee, had some conversations about getting ready for the committee. So I was almost going to ask her if she needed any assistance with today's presentation prior to the meeting, but from what you're saying, I should avoid any conversations like that.
Yes, if you were to have that conversation with numerous members of the committee. So like if you had a conversation with Task Force Member Moyer and Task Force Member Moore and Task Force Member Navarro, that's discouraged. But if you just had a conversation with Task Force Member Moyer, then you're happy to have that discussion.
Okay. And the we have a few public interest groups, La Mesa Conversations, some service clubs that at some point might want somebody to talk to them. If we receive such a request, is the advice to just keep it to one person?
Yes, the advice is to keep it between you and the member of the public. You can advise them if they want to participate in a future meeting with the library task force to join and bring up their question and comments and concerns at that meeting.
Okay. And then still in that topic area, the Brown Act, per our previous meeting, when we got involved with discussions about the library and the Civic Center, it's my understanding that the City Council has a Civic Center subcommittee. And I was just wondering if, I don't ever recall, I haven't looked thoroughly, but to see if they've ever posted an agenda for their Civic Center meetings. And to know, maybe Mr. Tomaino or yourself can let us know, is that council subcommittee still active and are they meeting?
I can provide a quick response. And that task force, I don't believe has met in some time. So I'm not sure that they're active at this point.
But if they do meet, they would be required, the clerk would post some sort of notice and we'd have the opportunity to observe and participate.
Not as a city council subcommittee, if that's what you're referring to. So the city
Yeah.
council subcommittee is an opportunity for not more than a majority, for 2 members of the council to discuss an issue with staff on a very specific nature. The subcommittee then reports out to the full council at some point with recommendations so that there can be a public discussion, but those are not, meetings are not subject to the Brown Act.
Curious. And then concerning the Robert Rule of Order.
John, I believe they're considered ad hoc. Right, Carlo?
That is correct.
So in the presentation that you just saw, the ad hoc type of meetings are not subject to the Brown Act. So those are ad hoc meetings for a specific goal or purpose that they're asked to achieve or bring back to council.
I thought they were standing.
I have a question. Is the chair going to allocate minutes to the speaker? Like in this case, are you limited to 3 minutes, 4 minutes? Or is it open?
For public comments, our standard is.
No, I'm talking about our comments within us, within the task force.
Oh, no. Your comments are not limited to 3 minutes. Neither is your discussion.
Okay.
Does that mean shut up?
Can I chime in for a minute? Does everybody see or hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We do now.
I was having trouble with my computer with the audio. So I had to shift over to my iPad. So I just want to make sure that you can see and hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I'm here.
Well, I had one last comment or question concerning the Robert's Rules of Order and the discussion, the presentation about the chair. And it was something I was going to ask about during the meeting anyway. And do we assume Mr. Tamaino's our chair, or are we going to elect our own chair at some point?
Correct. So our plan was to put on the next meeting agenda the selection of a chair and vice chair. We wanted to give you an opportunity to become acquainted, to get a little bit of time and work with each other before making that decision. But that is our plan for the next meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Is that all questions?
Well, I have one question that I think might have been answered, but I'm not sure. The question was asked, is there any other group or task force or committee sponsored by the city council working on library issues? I wasn't sure whether they said yes or no.
Task Force Member Navarro, if your question is there an additional, another city group that is working on
Yes, is
library
there
issues?
anybody else working on it this time other than us?
They would be the task force. That is the mission of the task force.
Okay, I think that concludes this item.
All right, very good. Thank you, Deputy City Clerk. So moving on to the next item is item 4.3 is the selection of a regular meeting schedule. So we had, during our first meeting, had some limited discussion about this potential meeting schedule. We have had 2 special meetings so far. So these aren't regular meetings yet, they're special meetings. We have recommended a Thursday at around this time because it makes sense for some operational efforts on the city's behalf. And we're recommending looking at the 3rd Thursday of the month at this time. And wanted to get any comments or feedback from the task force.
The third Thursday at 4 o'clock, that sounds good to me.
Would that mean that we would meet next week since it's the 3rd Thursday, or would we not meet until January?
We would not meet until January unless the task force felt that there was a need for a special meeting prior to that.
I'm fine with that.
Thank you. So seeing no further discussion or questions, it might be appropriate to have a motion, a second, and a vote on this item as well.
I make a motion that the task force meet on the 3rd Thursday of the month to conduct the library business.
I'll second.
Okay, Deputy City Clerk, if you could take us through a roll call vote, please.
Sure. Task Force Member Moyer, how do you vote?
Right? Sorry.
Task Force Member Dugan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Task Force Member Harris, how do you vote?
Aye.
Task Force Member Moore, how do you vote?
Yes.
Task Force Member Navarro, how do you vote?
Yes,
Task Force Member Schmitz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Task Force Member Wilcox, how do you vote?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And then the last item on the under current business of our agenda is the presentation regarding the San Diego County Library Needs Assessment. So at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Task Force Member Moore, who has prepared a presentation for the task force regarding this item.
Okay, and somebody's going to run the slideshow for me.
Yes, our Deputy City Clerk is getting ready to share her screen to run the presentation for you.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is a brief presentation about the library needs assessment, and it will include a community. You can move forward to the next slide. It'll include a community analysis, excuse me, current building assessment, the county building philosophy, new library recommendations, and discussion and next steps. Next slide. So the community of La Mesa population isn't showing, but it's 59,249. And I think we made a mistake on our slide there. Card holders, we have about 67,000 card holders from this area. That includes the population and some immediate outlying areas. The median age is 39. The biggest age group is 40 to 50-ish, and followed by seniors. And you can see that in the statistics there that come from the 2019 census. There is a 12.6% poverty in the community, and that information also came from the census. Next slide. The current library is 10,000 square feet. We share a building with the post office for that space. The post office occupies 7,000 square feet of additional space. Next slide. The current library has many pros. It's a beautiful, well-lit space with high ceilings. It's a central location that's easy to get to from mass transit, and there's a dedicated space for the bookstore. I would say it's a library that feels really good as soon as you walk in the door and makes people feel welcome. There, unfortunately, are not any meeting or event spaces inside that building, and it's noisy because it's busy and seating is limited. Like we just have discussed, the building stays pretty fully utilized, and it's often challenging for customers and people who come in to find a seat. There's limited space for technology and high demand in that community, and children and teens areas are small and open to the rest of the library. The staff area is a little cramped and windowless, and one of the things the staff often comment about is the limited size of the break room. Next slide. So the library, the current building philosophy is to utilize an operational model for all new facilities. So we have a standard bubble diagram, which you'll see on the side of the slide, where we create space adjacencies. We try to put children's area generally in the back of a library, so all the noise can be in one area contained, and kids can be safely watched from the back of the building where they're better protected. There's usually a marketplace area that's we call a great room that holds all popular materials, and that's aimed at providing easy access to high interest materials for people who might want to come in and get out and be on their way in a more convenient manner. There's usually a community room. We have lots of need for civic engagement in San Diego County and have found many uses for community room space in our libraries, such as supporting elections and other community meetings, as well as things that we support throughout the county. So for instance, during COVID, the library provided spaces where people could come and get cool zone space and still have additional space safe for people to come and use in the library as well. Next slide. Our building philosophy is changing a little bit. The library has been going through a long-range strategic plan, and we've been evaluating how we build our buildings. We have an increasing emphasis on efficiency of space and improving customer experience through innovation, where Our model started with a floating collection and convenience of self-service and flexible spaces. It continues to evolve to include sustainable and net zero design, expansive access to technology and programming, and public spaces available for a lot of learning experiences that encourage civic engagement, both in person and online, and a larger expansion of virtual platforms. Next slide. Some of our recommendations are to create an outdoor area for reading, to negotiate the space between the post office and the library to construct an additional 3,000 square foot space that might of community room that would include public toilets and access for both interior and exterior spaces. We'd open up the wall that separates the existing teen area from the rest of the library and increase the allotted square footage. We would also encourage considering the mezzanine, a mezzanine of about 5,000 square feet, and we'd want to add an all-gender toilet. Additionally, on the next slide, you'll see recommended amenities that we include in our buildings, including a community room that seats 130 people. The city of La Mesa does have community meeting space, and city council and the local police department has a meeting room available that I know the Friends of the Library might use from time to time. There's also, now we provide separate spaces for children and teens, plus homework centers, and one of the current trends in libraries is also to consider space where a family might go in and use a meeting space with a parent and a child and a teen all in the same area. They might be homeschooling and want to be together. Something else you might be more naturally thinking about is a meeting space where entrepreneurs or community partners could come together for a smaller meeting, like a small discussion room. And computers, there's still an enormous need for computers. We would recommend for a library of this size that there were 16 public computers plus 24 laptops, which if you think about the current La Mesa library, that's quite an increase in use. Lots of people bring their own devices, but there's still a digital divide, and we find a pressing need to provide access to technology for the public. We also provide self-service video, audio-visual system and video conferencing, which is part of the upgrades we've been providing to community rooms and new buildings we build and remodels. Generous seating and reading areas, a Friends of the Library bookstore and donor wall, and a 24/7 automated book return. Next slide. I've also included a couple of library examples for you all to consider. I've included Lemon Grove Library because it's close to the size of what we would recommend for La Mesa. It's 16,600 square feet. Those of you who lived in the area probably know that the Lemon Grove Library was built under a school bond of $28 million that was funded through a public vote in 2008. So that built a new school and a library during that time. It includes 16,000 square feet for the library, a new school. In that library, there is a dedicated computer lab. There's also study rooms that are modular and can be combined. So it could be a small study room and a bigger study room for a larger group, which is really nice and creates more flexible space. There's a separate teen area and kids area, and there's a school media specialist on site. There's also a Friends of the Library bookstore there. Next slide. The other library that I wanted to talk to you about is Alpine Library. It's also about 13,000 square feet. It is an example of a new library that was built to provide service to a community about this size. This happens to have been built by the county, and it is a state-of-the-art library. It's a net zero library. It has most of the modern features that we are including now with a community room, that is flexible and open and can be divided, modular study rooms, a computer lab, a separate children and teens area, a homework craft area. It's beautiful and inspiring to the community. There's public art that's included as part of the scope of work. And you can see from these pictures here, it's a building that will stand for quite some time and be inspiring to the community. So, and for comparison, Lakeside Library, which is being built now, is a $19 million project. So Alpine was built in 2015. Lakeside will be finished next year. So that gives you an idea of how building costs have escalated in that period. Okay. That's my presentation. If there are questions or discussion, otherwise I'll turn it back to Carlo.
I have a question. I noticed you mentioned something about that the La Mesa Library suggested square footage would be about 1,600 square feet.
15,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1,000, yes. But I guess where I was confused, is there a correlation to the population? Because
There
when you
is
compare
now.
Lakeside and Lemon Grove, they're both significantly smaller and their libraries are about the size of the one you're suggesting for us.
Yeah, I actually chose them for their square footage. Those libraries were both built prior to the library making decisions in our long-range strategic plan about size for population. But the size is correct for La Mesa.
I've got a question. You
Sure.
said the Alpine Library was built 2015
Correct.
and the Lemon
Finished.
Grove, when was that built?
That was funded in 2008 and built right after that.
Okay, so approximately 2010.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Can your presentation be emailed to us so that we have this? There was a lot of good information there that part of it was obscured by our pictures on the side. So I'm wondering if we could get a digital copy.
I would imagine, Carlo, isn't that public record now?
It is, absolutely. And we'll send the members of the task force a digital copy of the presentation for your convenience
Okay.
and review. Absolutely.
And then specific to libraries, I've been to a library in a larger city that actually had sound deadened rooms for music practice. And given that La Mesa's got the Arts Academy over there at La Mesa, what used to be La Mesa Middle School, and I know there's a fair number of theater groups and theater schools. If they had a place they could rehearse, is that the kind of thing that the county library system considers?
It certainly could be considered. There's obviously a cost involved in doing something like that. I can tell you in a more general sense, we did use sound attenuation in building and renovating Bonita Library recently, which is a new experiment for us. We have used sound baffling, which I would say has mixed results. I think a soundproof room is something we have not particularly built that would need investigation and specific design engineering.
Okay.
I have a comment. On
Sure.
my last visit to the library, Lemon Grove Library, I was really impressed with the number of young people that were using it. They were all over the place and actually carrying books and going into the community room to have some sort of a exercise thing going on. So if we're trying to encourage our young people to read more and engage more, boy, that's a good model to follow.
Thank you. It's a lovely library that serves a very specific need in the community and a great partnership with the Lemon Grove School District. So you see lots of kids in there after school, and it serves a real community need.
Susan, can I ask a question about the sound attenuation?
Yes.
Are we talking about walls or more like sound baffles that are hung from the ceiling?
Well, John, I think it depends on what you're asking. If you want a soundproof booth, that would take engineering design and be different than.
No. I'm asking about what you did at Bonita.
What we did
that-
what we did at Bonita this time is a special sound system that actually introduces white noise into the space. And we have done sound baffling in prior instances. And I would say it's gotten mixed reviews from panels hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah, my experience, those of you that have been to the sports arena down in the Midway District, I know decades ago they realized the sound in there was horrible. So they hung a bunch of big sound baffles from the ceiling. And I don't know if it really helped or not. They don't seem to have anything like that in the Aztec Arena for their basketball games, but again, they probably want to emphasize noise, not deaden it. So I just wondered if, given our high ceiling and the openness of our library, if hanging some sort of sound baffle or putting panels on the walls would help with some of the noise.
It may. That's an engineering question. I would say, from my experience with building libraries, the thing that helps the most is as our libraries have gotten busier, trying to create ways to help customers spread out and create space so they are not talking over the top of each other. That's why the creation of study rooms has occurred. Those are glassed-in rooms and they tend to give some sound separation. Sound baffling is another way. And I think for us, further reviewing the success of the sound attenuation we did at Bonita is something we need to do. That's been in place for about a year now. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. That was a very good overview.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Task Force Member Moore. I thought that was a very a good presentation. I think what I'd like to suggest is I think it starts putting us on a little bit of a path, because what I'd like for this group to be able to do is to present some recommendations to the City Council about the options and about what next steps this group might like to recommend. I think that a potential approach, and I would rely on the expertise of this group here, would be maybe to have a more specific discussion on needs or desires in terms of what would be contained in a project like this, so that those can be outlined along with a continuing discussion of the process that's been outlined here. And that's something that we can do as staff ahead of time, just prepare a document to give you a starting point, so that you can have that discussion about needs and desires and talk about maybe some process elements that need to be considered as part of that. Unless anyone has any other suggestions or you'd like to see something on the agenda.
I have a comment on that. Do you think there's a way that in a reasonable period of time, the committee could do something like the True North survey of the community to find out what the community's perceptions and needs are?
That's a really good thought. I mean, something that we want to do is try to engage the community and get a sense for what folks might want to see. The True North survey is a statistically valid survey that takes 800 residents and does a pretty extensive survey. We would probably never be able to get to a statistically valid number, but there may be a way for us to consider some kind of informal survey or something that allows us to gather more feedback from the community, in addition to the folks that are here, because you are the delegates that were selected by the council to help represent the community. Of course, we have these meetings. They also are a forum, but it's something that we can take back as staff and consider what would be an appropriate way to do that, because I think it's important that we get as much community feedback as we can and make sure that as we move forward with recommendations to council, that we've given due consideration to many ideas that could be very meritorious and valid, as we've heard here, and want to give people an opportunity to comment.
Well, we get surveys through the emails all the time. It could be, it could follow that example. Just about
Yeah,
every
what
time I
was
take
happened
my
with
car to the
MacArthur
dealership,
Park.
I get a survey request,
Yeah.
and I answer it, maybe 2 pages.
Well, thank you for doing that. And we have other methods that I can talk to our communications manager, for example, about how we can get the word out, what kind of questions we might ask. We just premiered a few weeks ago a city manager update that goes to the public. So I hope that you've all signed up for that. You can do that through our website. It contains a lot of good information about things that are happening at the city. That may be another avenue for us. So
Yeah,
let us go
that
back
would
as
be good.
staff and provide some recommendations to you.
Yeah, the MacArthur Park survey was, I thought, really simple and easy. That, I mean, I did that through social media, and it provided some. But I think we'll have to come up with some options for people to have before we do that kind of thing. But that was really, I thought, super simple and got a lot of information presented to be able to check out.
Yeah, I think that's a good possible template. The other thing I would also suggest is I want this group to opine on what questions are being asked, because your feedback is important in that process. So we can come back to you and talk about what that process would look like and help design something that makes some sense in capturing those community sentiments.
There was a member of the La Mesa community that was concerned about us not following a present library plan that resides in La Mesa somewhere. What was that all about?
Was that
Can
a
I answer?
reference? Sir, go ahead.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Glidden's comment at the beginning of the meeting was in reference to the vision that the city expressed 15, 20 years ago when they were getting ready to do the Civic Center with a new police and fire station, the building that the library and post office is in now. But the follow-up to that was hopefully to have a new city hall and a new permanent library. And the city, I think, as we heard in our last meeting, the city applied for grant money to build a 30-some thousand square foot new library. Didn't get the money. And so now the city is saying, that vision is sort of gone past. We don't have the resources to do it. So I think Mr. Glidden's critique of us was we slipped into plan B a little too easily without really following up on the previous vision for a new built, designed and built from scratch library.
Okay.
So at this point, what I'd like to recommend is for staff to go back and put together an agenda for the next meeting that talks about a community survey and what that might look like. We can put our ideas down to share with you and help build out what that process would look like and what that survey might look like. And then maybe have a continuing conversation about needs assessment as well, so that we can help to craft some recommendations that you would ultimately present to City Council. And as we move forward, and then to continue to develop this process.
Yeah. Was anything done on discussion of the post office? I think that they were supposed to have some conversation about whether they plan to stay there or whether they have anything in their plans in some future time to move out and close that location. Was there anything done on that?
So Task Force Member Moore's presentation included a brief mention there about the post office and a request to maybe have their space reduced by some measure, because they do occupy 7,000 square feet. And as I mentioned during our last meeting, there may be an opportunity during some lease negotiations that may be coming up in 2022 that could open the door for a conversation at least about that. And that's one way to increase the space that's at the.
I think that should be an item that goes on a list somewhere that we can have as an active action item.
Mm-hmm. I think that could be potentially one of the recommendations made to the City Council from the task force.
Mm-hmm.
For your agenda, I assume we'd also have a discussion about a chair.
We would, yeah, as previously mentioned, that would probably be one of the first items on the agenda, is the selection of a chair and a vice chair. And the chair would help to not only run the meetings, but also then to be the spokesperson to present the recommendations to City Council. And so I would encourage you all to think about, is that something you want to do? Whoever shows interest in that, and then we would have a vote at the next meeting about that item specifically.
We had our Friends of the Library board meeting last week, and I made a presentation, and one of our members was on the homeless task force. And she was asking about whether or not we were going to get any presentations by other outside entities or groups or persons. And we just, in Susan Moore's presentation, she brought up Alpine, Lemon Grove. If there'd be a way to reach out to somebody with those entities, the Friends or the library system, or if we went to Lemon Grove, somebody at the city or the school district. But could we get somebody to come in and give us their experience and give us some advice? And
a task force member, Smith, if that is a request from the task force, we can certainly accommodate bringing somebody in for a presentation. I'd certainly be interested to know your ideas. If there's, like as you mentioned, there are some specific groups that you'd want to have present their experiences and recommendations. That's something we can absolutely put on the agenda.
Well, since Mr. Navarro was from Lakeside, maybe he can give us some ideas about who from out there, since they're about to get a new library, what do's and don'ts they might have. I'd love to get somebody in from Imperial Beach, since there's another city, Imperial Beach and Lemon Grove, as two cities that the county provides services for.
I think those are good suggestions, and I will reach out to the members of the task force individually for other suggestions, and you can also reach out to me. And we can certainly schedule some presentation items that help round out your discussion on this issue. I think it's good to get those different perspectives. So just as a matter of just decorum for the meeting, or I want to make sure that if we're done with item 4.4, I think it might be an opportunity for us to move into staff and task force member announcements. I think we've had a few of those already, but I'd like to open up the opportunity for anyone that wants to make an announcement to do so at this time. Okay.
Well, I will make one personal observation that might or might not affect our next meeting. I'm in the queue, the waiting list for knee replacement surgery sometime after the first of the year. So if I have such an event around the time of that next meeting, I might not be available, or I might be available and under heavy influence of drugs for pain, but we'll see.
But we'll hope for the best there. Thank you for letting us know. All right, are there any other announcements from members of the task force? All right, seeing none, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 5:15, and I will be in touch with you regarding other presentation items, and then we will meet back again in January. I hope that everyone enjoys their holidays. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.